All right. Hello, everyone. We're very excited to have Natalie join us, a three-time Marketo champion from McGraw-Hill, to present on 5 tips for operational success with Marketo Engage to the Houston Mug. I am going to pass it over to Natalie to get started.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I'm super happy to be here. I'm Natalie Kramer. I'm the Marketing Automation Manager at McGraw-Hill. I'm a three-time Marketo champion and have been using Marketo for just about 6 years. So I'm super happy to be with you guys today and share a little bit about what I've learned with using Marketo and how you can use it to be successful. So we're going to talk about a lot of different things today. I have kind of a high overview agenda here. But first, we'll talk about getting your team the education they need, kind of when they need it. We'll talk about how to organize your workspace and your folder structure, including naming conventions. We'll talk about campaign standards using program templates, how you can have high quality campaigns with a QA process, and then making sure everyone's aligned for consistency and success as you go forward with some of your new tools. Go ahead and jump right in. So the first part is education for your team. So I know some people are a team of one, some people have a team with multiple people, but getting people education with Marketo is really key. I know when I came into Marketo, I'd come from previous other tools, other marketing automation tools, but I was brand new to Marketo. So it was really helpful for me to deep dive and kind of get training for myself. And that's something I've carried over with all of my team members and other employees who've joined the team over the years. So Marketo has some really good training sessions. It's been quite a few years since I've taken them, but the Marketo core concepts in the university is super helpful to kind of give your team that initial deep dive and learn, the naming, the terminology, all of the great things about Marketo without someone internally having to do that for them. So it's really helpful to get that outside perspective of kind of the bigger picture of Marketo. And the second thing, kind of bringing that knowledge internally, is one-on-one training. So really sitting down with your team members, your new team members, and training them one-on-one. So nothing's going to beat you sitting down and taking them through your processes, showing them, how your team does things specifically. You might have some practices that are different, than kind of the high-level Marketo concepts. So it's super helpful to walk them through examples live, one-on-one. And then finally, there's this great link on the community. It's Marketo newbie resources, and it kind of links out to all of the different things that are out there. So the Marketo product docs, the fundamental concepts, the user groups. Obviously, if you guys are here, you know how great those are. And then also Adobe Summit session recordings. With Summit happening just about a month ago, there's still free access to all of those recordings. So I would definitely recommend checking those out. I know there's some great sessions throughout. And then we'll kind of transition over. So as you're setting up your workspace, if you're new to Marketo, or maybe you've been using it for a few years, but you might, could use a little cleanup, kind of get things fine-tuned. Setting the groundwork for an organized workspace is really key. So I always start with, with the folder structure. So I always think about how can you organize, based off the different business units you have. Think from like a higher level, how you can divide it up, and then how you can kind of break it down within those areas. So depending on the complexity of your business, you might have, 10 folders, you might have hundreds, but really think about how granular you can get within each area. So here on the side, I have an example of one of our folder structures. So we break everything out, everything that's kind of a customer-facing marketing campaign into this folder. And then beneath that, we kind of have we have 3 or 4 bigger buckets for the different types of campaigning we're doing. So this example is our central marketing folder structure. And then within that, we have a few key folders. So you can see here we have an archive folder. So this is super helpful for campaigns that are no longer needed, past campaign years or seasons. We archive and drag everything into those folders. We have an ongoing folder. So this is great for things that are ongoing. So things like your forms or maybe landing pages, things like that, routing programs that kind of live on forever, that you're not going to archive on an annual or semi-annual basis. These are great things to live within your ongoing folder. We have a lot of recurring reporting that lives in there that goes to our stakeholders, and then other things too. And then finally, we have the current, for us, we are higher ed based, so colleges and universities. So we work very much on like the semester basis. Our campaign seasons break out into a fall semester and a spring semester. Everything we do really falls along that. And we kind of split the calendar year in half and determine it whether it's a spring or fall campaign. So in this case, we kind of pick up our naming convention for central marketing for those folders. And then the year is 21, and then the term is spring. So we do that for every product or every campaign folder we have. We break it out by the semester, and that makes it super easy to archive too. So pretty soon here, we're coming to the end of the spring semester. We'll go through and do massive cleanup and archiving of all of those spring folders, and then build out our fall folder structure. So then to kind of layer on with that, we carry over those program naming conventions within the folders as well. So that CM21S, every campaign that lives within that folder is going to have that naming convention at the beginning of it. So this helps with the reporting, just finding programs, when they ran, you can search easily for the program names, what folder to look in, and everything's just super consistent. And that flows down throughout all of our campaign folders as well. So I just really encourage you to think about, if you have program names, how do you want them to coincide with your folders? Are there other things you want to track or have be searchable? Different things like that can be really helpful. It's hard to see that at the beginning, but as you kind of get into your usage, you're going to realize all of those things that you want to track and see easily. So we're going to transition a little bit and talk about program templates. So this is really, you have your structure of your workspace defined, you have your folders, you have your naming conventions. One of the things that can really help you run better operationally is having program templates. So we talked a little bit about your teams at the beginning. If you have a team that's many people, or you have a decentralized org, that people are all over the organization, program templates can be super helpful to kind of set the framework for your teams. They can clone them, and then they can kind of fill in the pieces that are needed. So I always think about program templates. If anything you need to do is repeatable, you probably should have a program template for it. So if it's an integration, a certain type of campaign, different things like that are super helpful to have a program template for. And then when your team has to create a new campaign, or you have to create a new campaign, you never really have to start from scratch. You can always start from a program template. You kind of have the different pieces already in place. If there's things that you don't need, they can be removed, but at least you have all of those pieces there from the beginning. So as you think about program templates, I would say, I like to brainstorm initially. When I first came into McGraw-Hill, we didn't have any program templates. So it was kind of a clean slate to start with. And it was very easy to see the types of things that we needed to have program templates for. So we started looking at, what types of campaigns do we run all the time? At the time we were doing a lot of basic email sends, a lot of webinars. So those were a couple of the templates we had first and built out. So start making that list. Maybe you do a lot of surveys, or you have a lot of forms. Those are great ways to get started and kind of build your list, figure out what the top priority is, and go from there. Another really good use for program templates is integrations. So if your integrations require a certain number of steps or certain assets in Marketo to build out, having program templates for those can be super helpful. I know one we use, we integrate with Qualtrics quite a bit. So having a program template built around those surveys is super helpful to kind of have and clone and then customize for the individual program. And then too, you'll think about the list at the beginning, and if your org is anything like mine, it's always changing, so there's different things you might have to add. We are kind of ever evolving our templates. We're tweaking things with new Marketo functionality. We're updating things, adding in new tokens. So I always like to think they're never really done, but it's super helpful, as you create new versions to clone like a historical reference, so you have those if you need to go back and reference them later on. All right, so then as you're thinking about what goes within your program templates, we have a little checklist here. So here on the side is one of our basic template sends that we use for our email programs. So we use a default program in this case, and this is really everything that we might need for a basic email send. through tracking program statuses, if there's a rep alert needed to alert the rep of certain behavior, and all the different things along the way. So definitely think through, your program type and your channel and how you want to track that on the types of programs you're creating program templates for. We usually use the default program for most of our sends, and then the event related program for event program templates. But it's really, if you're doing a lot of nurtures or things like that, you can choose your program type too. And then think through your emails and landing pages, forms, all of your assets. So you might need all of these different asset types. You might just need some of them, but really think through the scope of your program and what might be needed. So for our webinar program template, we use a lot of landing pages. We have like a master Marketo registration form, and then we have landing pages within each program to track the registration. So you might need different things like that depending on your program template use case. And then a big part of our templates is our sales enablement. So how we want to notify our sales team of a campaign activity. So throughout the program statuses, we have different interesting moments that push to Marketo Sales Insight. We have the option for a rep alert, if the engagement within the program is to a certain level that we'd want the rep to know. And then we also have the entire program synced to a Salesforce campaign. So then that way we have the history, and then we can tie it to revenue very easily with Salesforce reports. And then we also think about your smart campaigns. Obviously, that's a big part of the program as far as sending the campaign, updating your program statuses. We always do an internal send on all of our email programs. So this helps us override communication limits, when we're sending a lot of campaigns out, and we have an internal seed list that gets every send that goes out. So you can imagine at the height of campaign season, there's quite a few emails going to that internal seed list. And then finally, tokens is a huge part of the program templates. So you want to make it as easy to use your program templates as possible. We'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. So anything that appears in your program more than once is really a great opportunity to use tokens. And I love this Aladdin GIF. I actually just saw this again online the other night. So it's still in the world. But for example, on our basic email send, there's not a ton that we tokenize. We use the from name and email address. We have some different tracking tokens that we use to tie into our interesting moments and things like that. But where it becomes really powerful is on like a webinar program, like I mentioned. So you can see a screenshot over here of what one of our webinar tokens tabs looks like. And we really tokenize as much as we can here, from the host name and bio down to the description, all of the details to join your webinar event, kind of anything that is going to be repeated within your campaign more than once. We like to build a token out for. And in our case, our webinar template really has like 7 to 8 emails, I think, overall, between reminders and confirmations and alerts to the rep to help push attendance, all of those good things. So then if something changes, you can just go into the token tab and update it once. It flows down through your whole program as opposed to having to do it, in every single asset where it appears. So it really helps with things like your from name and your email address, all of your event details, all of your event provider details, your calendar reminders, all of that good stuff. And I think I mentioned this earlier, but definitely make sure to schedule time to review and improve your templates. It's kind of easy to set it and forget it. But as you're using your program templates and as your team uses them, there's always going to be, pain points and things you want to improve and things you pick up over the years that you can kind of bring into that to make it even easier for your team to use. All right, so this is something one of my favorite areas to talk about, and that's quality control. So over the years, when I first started at McGraw-Hill, we didn't really have any quality control for our campaigns. We had a lot of different people who were in Marketo building their own programs and executing their own programs. But one of the things we've done over the last 6 years is build a really detailed quality assurance process. So, you have your program template, you can fill in the blanks, but making sure your data and your information in your campaign is correct is huge. So we have 3 stages. And the first stage So my team kind of serves as an internal agency type of resource. So campaign owners submit requests to us, we kind of fulfill the request. And then the first step is the email content, landing page content, anything that we've built for the campaign goes back to the campaign owner for review. So they're verifying that content's correct, the audience filters they provided, and the list count that we're getting is correct. And then any links or anything within the email is correct and working. So this is kind of, they can look for grammar and they can look for, brand correctness and things like that. But we're really making sure with the campaign over review that the content is correct, everything is working, the audience filters are what they're looking for, and the list count is what they would expect to see. So that's kind of the campaign owner part of it. And then one of the best pieces I think we've added over the years is we actually have a proofreader. We're not lucky enough to have a proofreader internally, but we have an outside consultant that we've contracted with. And she does all of our proofreading. So she's looking at grammar, branding standards, legal standards, all of those things that, an untrained eye might not see. So this has been super helpful in catching, little mistakes, making sure all of the copyrights and the trademarks are accounted for. So this is a really great step to add to your process if you're able to. And then finally, every campaign that we do wraps up with a marketing automation check. So on my team, we have someone else within the team check every component of the Marketo program. So it takes time, and we typically have about a 24-hour SLA for this, so 24 hours prior to launch. But we're checking everything within Marketo, all the nuts and bolts. So making sure the program setup is right, making sure the tokens look good, making sure they pull into all of the assets as needed, making sure the email is set up right, any default values are set on tokens, testing out everything just to make sure it's ready to go. And then again, checking the segmentation that was provided, the counts, any smart campaign logic, because none of that would have been touched in any of the previous QA checks. So we're really making sure that everything within Marketo is set up and ready to go. So then as you go forward, obviously we talked about a lot of the template stuff, the team training, your integrations, all of those things. One of the biggest pieces that I've taken as my team has grown over the years is documentation and making sure everyone is on the same page as you go forward. Because you can have templates and you can have all of these things, but unless you have the tools to support your team, a lot can still go wrong. So anytime we build a program template or have a new integration, have a new data process, have any kind of Marketo process running in general, I like to document everything. So it really depends on your team where it's documented. People use Confluence, people use a lot of different tools for that. But we centralize on like a team OneDrive. So we have all of our different documentation out there that's accessible to everyone within our team. So this just really helps, there's a step-by-step guide for everything they're doing, whether it's a program template or an integration. It's easy to go back and reference, if it's something you're only doing a few times a year, it's there and you can go and pick it up and kind of go on your way. And then within the documentation, it's always super helpful to include screenshots, links that are referencing out to program templates, links that are referencing examples, just as much extra content as you can put into it can really help. And then obviously, if you're starting from scratch and you haven't documented so far, I would say document or prioritize what needs to be documented first. So you're not going to have everything created at one time. It's just not possible. But figure out what your team needs. Like what's the most important documentation? Is it program templates? Are there integrations that the team keeps getting tripped up on? Figure out what's most important and go from there. And then here's just, I don't know if this will come through. Sometimes this doesn't work on PowerPoint, but just some examples of different documentation that we've had. So again, checklists, screenshots, making sure that everything that the team needs within the documentation is there. So again, a lot of links, a lot of screenshots, give good examples throughout, and that can really help. So then, you have your documentation. The next step is to do really thorough team training. So your documentation can be a great resource, as you sit down with your team to train them on new processes, take them through the documentation, take them through any templates that you've created, and answer questions. It can be really easy to just say, like, here's the documentation, like do with it what you will. But it's really taking that time to make sure everybody's aligned on next steps, and just to answer any questions that people have. And like I mentioned, our team uses OneDrive, but there's obviously a lot of great resources out there. But make sure you have one central place for your team to find all of your resources. It can get to be a lot, so it's super helpful to have some resource to drive everybody to. And then super important, my team was decentralized before the pandemic, but it's become even more important, now that many of us are outside of offices, and there really is no central point to meet. But having those regular channels for communication. Our team uses Microsoft Teams. I know other teams use Slack, but just making sure you have those regular ways to reach out to each other, whether it be groups and things where the whole team can talk together, or just individual messaging can be super helpful, just to make sure people can ask questions quickly and get answers that they need. So kind of next steps, regrouping on what we talked about today. So like I said at the beginning, as you have new team members start or you're new to Marketo, definitely get your team the training that they need. And also think about it on an ongoing basis. The Adobe Summit and Marketo user groups are a great way to kind of continuing to educate yourself on what's going on, and make those incremental improvements in Marketo. And we talked about your folder structure and your naming conventions and the different ways you can get started there. We have the checklist that you can use to brainstorm your program template ideas, including how to use tokens, and then different ways to start your quality control efforts, and different ways you can kind of tie in pieces, not having to do it all at once, just kind of incrementally. And then finally, defining what documentation your team needs and then creating that plan as you move forward. So there's a lot of great things you can do. You could tackle all 5 of these things or take it one at a time, but there's really great ways to make operational improvements to your Marketo instance. So with that, we can go ahead and open it for Q&A.
Great, thank you so much. Great presentation. I think it's always good to have everything you pointed out inside of your instance and organized well. I'm going to stop the recording so we can open up Q&A.